The Dáil has been suspended until tomorrow morning following chaotic scenes in the chamber this afternoon over the speaking rights row. The government's plans to change Dáil standing orders were carried this afternoon. However, opposition TDs have warned the plan is a dark day for democracy as the political row continues.
It was chaotic, unruly and often confusing, but the government looks to have got its controversial changes to Dáil's speaking time over the line. From the off, the opposition maintained their unity and lined up to again excoriate the government's plan to create new speaking slots for the regional TDs and its own backbenchers.
Frankly, it is staggering the lengths to which you have gone with this brazen stroke.
This is a simple matter. You cannot be in government and in opposition at the same time.
This is a shameless political stroke that would make even Bertie blush.
We have written to you numerous times to try and resolve this issue and to make sure this dark day for democracy would not happen.
The Taoiseach was adamant, though, that the changes were modest.
You can't be serious. Costing our democracy. 8 minutes. 8 minutes on a Tuesday and our democracy is gone.
Please.
The Ceann Comhairle forcefully intervened on several occasions and chided noisy TDs.
You're making an absolute holy show of yourselves. And I am loath to say again, resume your seat, deputy.
But these words were not enough to restore calm, and a half-an-hour suspension followed. When the Dáil resumed, Verona Murphy invoked powers under Dáil rules to move straight to the key moment of the day, the vote. Unsurprisingly, the vote was not without incident and Sinn Féin refused to formally sign off on the result. The fury did not abate and soon the Ceann Comhairle called a halt to the day's work.
I adjourn the House to tomorrow's sitting in 0900 hours.
Even then, the controversy continued to rage as PBP TD Paul Murphy interacted with Michael Lowry inside the chamber. The independent TD insists he was just beckoning Mr Murphy to come over for a chat. Micheál Lahan, RTE News, Leinster House.
Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald has said democracy was turned on its head today and the opposition are disappointed and shocked. Speaking at Leinster House in a joint news conference with all opposition leaders, she said the Ceann Comhairle had done significant damage to her standing and to the independence of the office itself.
A fractious Dáil session today which dissolved in acrimony and confusion. The government feels it has scored a win in this protracted row, but the opposition have come together once again to cry foul.
They came in and in a very, very crude way literally rammed these provisions through the Dáil. I don't recall in my time being here anything like this ever.
The democracy of this country has had its two fingers shown to it. But inside there in that Dáil by a TD, but an independent TD that's supporting the government, and by the government who are doing it to the opposition.
The question now is whether this controversy, which has bedevilled the 34th Dáil, is actually over.
If we don't take a stand on this now, our ability to represent ordinary people out there is going to be significantly undermined, and that's what the government are trying to do.
And there are serious question marks over the Ceann Comhairle's handling of today's business and over the independence of her office.
Today, the Ceann Comhairle went down in a lot of people's estimations. I believe that you have to be independent as Ceann Comhairle. To not hear votes, to not ensure votes took place, to collapse the order of business.
Confidence in the Ceann Comhairle appears to be in short supply.
By show of hands, can I just ask any of you if you have confidence in Verona Murphy? Can you just put up your hand?
The opposition say that everything is on the table in terms of future actions. They will meet again tomorrow morning to discuss further, and it is clear the fallout from this episode has not fully played out. Sandra Hurley, RTE News, Leinster House.
Well, let's cross over to Leinster House now and our political correspondent Micheál Lahan, who's standing by. Micheál, the Dáil descending into chaos again today. Will there be repercussions when it resumes tomorrow?
I think there will be fallout, Sharon. That is inevitable because the fury has not abated here. And I think it is very clear where the opposition's ire is beginning to focus this evening, and that is on the Ceann Comhairle and how today's proceedings were handled. They have major questions around that. And I suppose this does put Verona Murphy in very hazardous political territory because when it comes to the office of Ceann Comhairle, confidence from across the Dáil is what is required. It is what is essential. It isn't just a case of having a majority of support there. Now, the government this evening saying that there is an attempt now by the opposition to try and intimidate the Ceann Comhairle, but what you will see, I think, when the opposition meet tomorrow is a contemplation, at least, as to whether or not they should raise further questions around their confidence in Verona Murphy. And if they were to go there this evening, they are coming close to the line, but they're not over it yet. If they were to move further tomorrow, well, then that would be a dramatic development indeed in this entire controversy.
You're making an absolute holy show of yourselves for the world to see. That was the view of Ceann Comhairle Verona Murphy on this afternoon's Dáil session. To discuss it, we're joined from Leinster House by Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou McDonald. Good evening, Deputy. Thanks indeed for joining us. We'll talk about the rights and wrongs of the issues in a minute, but whoever is responsible, it's not a good look, is it?
No, it's a very, very bad look, David, and a very bad day for the Dáil. We had the unedifying spectacle of the government ramming through fundamental changes to how the Dáil operates. And I know the public conversation has been about speaking time and how many minutes here or there. It's actually much more fundamental than that. The Dáil can only function when the rights and prerogatives and the job of government is defined and recognised and they carry out that task. And then equally, the rights, responsibilities and prerogatives of the opposition to hold the government to account, that has to be respected as well. And the government now has rammed through a motion to turn that on its head.
We'll talk about that in a second, but we also had this afternoon the unedifying spectacle, as you termed it yourself, of the opposition shouting down the Taoiseach when he was trying to answer a question that you had asked him and refusing to obey the rulings of the chair.
Well, if you want to focus on what I think is the image of the day, it's Michael Lowry giving 2 fingers to the opposition and 2 fingers to the Irish people. And that's been the theme of politics since the election and since the formation of this government. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Michael Lowry, this grubby deal that has now contrived to undermine and undercut the democratic functioning of the Dáil. Of course, that got a raucous response. This has been hotly contested because we are serious about doing our jobs, of representing people well, of calling out the clear government failures in housing and the provision of services and school places for children with special educational needs, health services, you name it. But this government doesn't want to be held to account, and they have moved heaven and earth to placate what a person that Micheál Martin himself described as a rogue politician. And they have enabled him effectively to give 2 fingers, not just to the opposition, but to Irish democracy and to the Irish electorate. Shameful scenes, unprecedented scenes, naturally, in response to that.
But you don't have any less time than you to ask leaders questions than you had in the last Dáil. Other opposition groups have more time because they have more TDs, obviously. And the Taoiseach was making the point that the nub of this, in terms of leaders' questions, is an 8-minute slot on Wednesday and an 8-minute slot on Thursday. And the government would argue that's hardly the downfall of Irish democracy.
And listen, they have repeated that mantra ad nauseum, and the simple repetition of it doesn't address the fundamental issue here, that it is members of the opposition who hold the government to account. The very idea that Michael Lowry and his mates, TDs that have backed the government, that support the government, some of whom are in government, that they would be charged with holding the Taoiseach of the day to account on the day-to-day issues that arise is clearly farcical. It's an absolute absurdity. And by the way, the Taoiseach makes much of his concern for backbench backbenchers and for others having speaking time. There has never been a time where people haven't had access to speaking time. And in fact, the Taoiseach is cutting in half Taoiseach's questions, another section of Dáil business, which in fact means that he's going to be offering those backbenchers less opportunities. It was never about that.
Okay.
This is about placating Michael Lowry, and it's about undermining what is a firm and robust opposition. And it's not just Sinn Féin saying this, David. We are united right across the opposition benches because we know exactly what this is about. This is a stroke. This is a stroke to end all political strokes.
We're up against the clock, so I just wanted to ask you a final question about the position of the Ceann Comhairle Verona Murphy. Are you going to put down a motion of no confidence in her?
Well, nobody observing today's business could have had any confidence in the way in which the Ceann Comhairle conducted herself. There is no question very, very substantial damage has been done to that office and to her standing. And I know it has been a subject of great annoyance and alarm amongst the opposition. Today, she behaved in a manner that was more akin to being a mudguard for the government rather than being an independent, impartial chair. She put a wrecking ball through standing orders.
Well, I'm sure she would dispute that. I'm sure she would dispute that.
Well, she very well may, but it played out
as leader of the largest opposition party, you are saying you don't have confidence in her. It's difficult to see how a Ceann Comhairle continue in office.
Well, look, we've begun the discussion amongst ourselves in Sinn Féin, but also with other members and parties and groups across the opposition. We're going to have to reflect on this very, very carefully. It's a very serious situation where in one fell swoop, you have the government acting in this high-handed, arrogant manner to undermine the democratic functioning of the Dáil, and you have a Ceann Comhairle that was happy to facilitate that. We have a lot to reflect on and a lot to do still on these questions.
OK, Mary Lou McDonald, leader of Sinn Féin, thank you for joining us on 6-1.
My pleasure.